I asked ChatGPT to create this for you. I described the demographic, and then I said, some of them forget. So, apropos of what John just announced, next Sunday, I'm going to introduce and interview, I think we may play it that way, a man named Alex McDonald, who is an expert on what's going on in the Middle East. I've met with Alex a couple times. We've exchanged emails and phone conversations. He is an amazing human being. And in one of our conversations, he stopped and he looked at me and he said, "Are you sure you're not a Quaker?" I suppose it's an option. But anyway, he will be here next Sunday. I know that next Sunday is Memorial Weekend, but I really want to encourage you to either be here in person if that's possible or to tune in online. He will be great. And sometime in June, I think, we are hosting in here the Pride Sunday. And today, if you want to, out on the plaza, you can pre-order. Buy. You can buy the Pride t-shirts that we will be using this year. They will take your money for a t-shirt. When you will get the t-shirt could be like the second coming. Today or when the Trump phones come. Oh, I see. Okay. I think they'll be before then. Okay, all right. So seriously, turn off your cell phone and be aware that no matter who you are, no matter where you are in your spiritual journey, you are celebrated here. We begin in silence, so if it helps to close your eyes, you can do that. So this reflects our intention to be here and to be mindful of the fact that we live inside the heart of sacred mystery and that this sacred mystery seeks to find expression through who we are and how we live. So may grace be in our heads and in our thinking. May grace be in our eyes and in our seeing. May grace be in our ears and in our hearing. May grace be in my mouth and in my speaking. May grace be in our hearts and in our understanding. And may grace be at our ends and at our departing. And grace of new futures. Give us freedom, willingness, and courage to relinquish the modes of life and living that prevent flourishing. Give us openness to receive a new and different future and the discipline enough to embrace it. And may all creation benefit from what we do here today. Amen. So I don't need to tell you that we live in a fearful and a frightening time. Not the first time that the human species has been in such a predicament. But spiritual teachings, such as the ones that I offer, are designed, among other things, to help us to live with courage in these times and to endure these times. So I want to begin today by saying that in order to move out of the arena where we are run and ruined and ruled by fear, In order to do that, the process is simple. It's not easy. It's just simple. We have to wake up. We have to grow up. We have to clean up our acts. And most of all, we have to learn at every level of our existence to treat other people as we ourselves would like to be treated. Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing. All of us in this room, including your teacher, think we've already done this. And that consequently, what happens is that such teachings are for other people, not for us. So the evolution that spiritual teachings, like the ones that you hear in ordinary life, are designed to meet is to deal with the resistance we have to moving further in any of these categories. So today, let's just assume, just for this period of time, that each of us has more to do in each of these areas. And if you don't think this is true for you, then you can readopt that position when you leave here today. But just for this time, let's assume that. So I want to invite you to do what I mentioned in the preview, and also something that I learned from Alan Watts that I'll talk about later today. I want you, before we begin today, just take a deep breath. Seriously, take a deep breath. Breathe in, and then let it go. Do that about 3 times. Just take a breath, let it go. Okay? As I mentioned in a preview, our Pilates instructor keeps advising us, now breathe. And I think, well, how the heck can you not? But there's a proper way to do it, is what she's saying. So take a deep breath, let it go, and let's get to work. So last week, I read to you some words that I used the very first Sunday that I taught in ordinary life, and I'm going to reread those very quickly because there was a follow-up to that during that week after that first Sunday that I want to read to you. So in that first meeting in ordinary life, I said, if you're disturbed by what happens in this class, that's good. In spiritual practice, it's good to be disturbed. The goal is to be disturbed as long as we can be disturbed. When you're not disturbed, it's only because you're not disturbed. It's not because nothing is not disturbing. Of course, because everything is always the way it ought to be, because the system operates perfectly, nothing is inherently disturbing. Of course, as long as we can't be disturbed, we can't know that. So if we want to wake up, we will want to continue to be disturbed and pay very close attention to being disturbed for as long as we are disturbed, because nothing is really disturbing. And then I said, now if you understood that and smile about it, you will probably enjoy this class. If you didn't understand it and you didn't smile about it, then you need this class, but you just probably won't enjoy it. So after that, the next week, I got a response to that class. And I cannot tell you who sent it because I don't remember. I'm of that age when that happens. But it was sent to me by email, and I almost have the guy's name back. I'm afraid to say it. He doesn't come anymore. I'm not even sure he's still alive. But this is what he wrote in response to that. Just so you will know, what you said was not what you intended, nor what we heard. What we heard, of course, was not what you said, and certainly not what you intended. And our understanding of what you meant was somewhat less than complete, not to mention inaccurate. We nevertheless are very appreciative of what we think we heard you say. That is brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. And I did a search. Nobody else wrote that except the person who was in Ordinary Life that Sunday. So today, I'm going to base my teaching on what I call one of Jesus's performance pieces. And in order to elaborate on what a performance piece is, I want to start here. One of the very great things that my beautiful bride has brought into my life is music. Now, I listened to music before we got together. I mean, great music. Neil Diamond, Jim Croce, the Beatles. But she was trained to be a concert pianist. And so I don't know that it was a condition of our marriage, but it came with the marriage. We are subscribers to the Houston Symphony. And I don't know if you are aware of this, but the Houston Symphony has one of the best orchestras, maybe in the world, certainly in the United States. And the reason for that is that Rice University's Shepherd School of Music fuels the performers who come into our orchestra. Our own Emily Amos, who has just received her master's degree from Rice. And this is a great plus for her, but a loss for us. She has been invited to be the organist of a cathedral in England. So we're going to lose this amazing artist. Daryl Robinson, who, by the way, this is the organ at Rice Studio Hall. I don't know if you've ever seen it or not. We saw it for the first time when we went to see Emily perform. It is massive. I mean, you go into a room that may sit 200-300 people at the most, and there is at one end a huge organ that takes the entire space. I asked Daryl Robinson what an instrument like that cost, and he said probably about $6 million. So a few weeks ago, we went to hear this guy. This is Joshua Bell. This is one of the nation's, maybe the world's, most outstanding violinists. And we heard him play a piece that he had commissioned during COVID. It was by 6 different composers, and it was an amazing piece of music. Now, I enjoyed that musical performance immensely. I didn't understand it. I couldn't duplicate it. Nonetheless, my life is different and enriched by having been immersed in that performance piece. Talking about a performance piece of Jesus today. So this is the connection I'm making. Now, what I'm about to say doesn't have a thing to do with today's teaching, but it is an example of the neurotic, crazy, rabbit hole way my brain works. This fiddle that Joshua Bell plays is a 1713 Stradivarius. It is worth about $15 million. So this instrument, this is not the program. I looked this up. We've heard Joshua Bell numerous times. He's amazing. And they quit printing in the symphony programs personal pieces of biography about the performers, which I miss, and interesting pieces about what they play. But they did mention this instrument, so I went and looked it up. This instrument has a very interesting history. It was stolen from its previous owner, Bronislaw Huberman, and it's called now the Huberman Stradivarius violin. So in 1936 at Carnegie Hall, it was stolen from Huberman's dressing room while he was performing on another violin. And when he returned, it was gone. Julian Altman, who is another musician in the symphony, confessed to his wife on his deathbed that he had stolen it. She turned it over to Lloyd's of London in exchange for a finder's fee. Lloyd sold it to another violinist named Norman Brainin for $1.2 million. Bell discovered that it was about to be sold to a German industrialist, so he sold the Stradivarius that he was currently playing for $2 million, and he bought this instrument for $4 million, and during the time it's appreciated now to be $15 million. So we're out of the rabbit hole. About 20 years ago, the Washington Post had Joshua Bell dress in jeans and a t-shirt and play as a street musician in a Washington, D.C. metro station. And this was during rush hour. Now, he played for about a half an hour. And the people who made the video of that have condensed it to about 2 minutes. And I want you to see it. This is Bell dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, a cap, and he is playing this $15 million violin. Here he goes. A performance piece. One person stopped. They counted 1,097 people who passed by. He earned just over $30 in tips. I bet he got paid more than that when we saw him last week. This, what you have just seen, became one of the most talked about social experiments about art, context, and perception in recent times. Now, I'm going to offer a teaching on some words of Jesus that most of you have heard some version of. And I want you to know that it's possible for us just to walk by. I also want you to know that it's possible to enjoy without understanding. I think it's helpful to understand that everything remains yet to be understood. Because everything we can understand is finite. And the heart's longings are left unfulfilled with what we understand. What fulfills us is what we are caught up in and what we surrender to, but yet will never understand. And realizing that we are caught up in and enjoying what we don't understand and can't understand is already the beginning of understanding. Understand? You can read that later. But there's always the risk that the teacher, and in this case I'm not referring to myself, I'm referring to Jesus, can perform his music. And we will be like those who bypass Joshua Bell's magnificent playing on a priceless instrument because we are so caught up in going hither and yonder and we miss understanding entirely. So when we sit with a text or with a piece of music or with a work of art or with another person, at least when we approach these things with spiritual intent, our goal is to open our hearts to the mystery that we are and what God is. So Sister Corita Kent, who was a Catholic nun, who was a very prominent person back in the 60s, she made her artwork do her protest speaking for her. And I encourage you, if you have the time and interest, to go on the internet and look up Sister Corita Kent's work. One of her works, which I love, which I think is deliberately difficult to decipher, is the one where she writes, to understand is to stand under, which is very difficult to read in the text. To understand is to stand under, which is to look up, which is a good way to understand. Parables, stories, poems, music, art, are ways to get an experience of understanding that which is not understandable, or of not understanding, but simply enjoying the experience. A man and a woman had been married for 25 years. They were celebrating their anniversary. It was a good marriage, not great, but it was okay. And the man, who was a university professor, for an anniversary present, gave his wife a book that he had written about her. He had been working secretly on it the entirety of their entire marriage, and the book was entitled You. And as she unwrapped the heavy box and took out the tome, he excitedly told her, "Look, I have written a book about you. Everything about you is in this book. If you flip over to the back, you'll see that it's indexed. So anytime you want to know something about yourself, you can just look it up." She looked at him bewildered, and just by her body language, she was saying, "What have you done to me?" And he was crestfallen because he had already been working on a gift for their golden anniversary, a 3-volume set of books called Us. So last week, we used one of the teachings of Jesus that the scholars say is one of the teachings of Jesus that he most assuredly said. And he taught about our true identity in that teaching. We are who we are in God, no more, no less. So if you wanted to summarize the teaching of Jesus, it would be this. And if we can hang on to this, and we can live from the center of this, then in the words of the mystic who's known as Julian of Norwich, all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. So today we're going to take another step in that direction by trying to get another or hopefully better perspective on how fear and our need to control can so easily block our path. So our true identity, no matter how it seems, no matter what is going on, is that we reside in the heart of sacred mystery. And our opportunity is to live out this identity. Our opportunity is to live with this assurance. And yet what we have done, metaphorically, is that we've gone to God and we have said, look, I have written a book about you. Anytime you want to know something about yourself, you can just look it up. We have it all indexed. Not only that, we have set up schools to study you. We've written books and taught courses about you. We call these words we say about you theology. Theo from the word God, logos from the word meaning the word words, so theology is words about God. We have systematic theology, doctrinal theology, historic theology. You would be impressed. And so God is impressed. And God sends Jesus to one of our seminaries. And Jesus goes back to God after the first semester and says, I flunked out. And God says, how could you do this? And Jesus said it was just so confusing. One person in two essences in one person. I just couldn't get it. So God, like the woman in the story I just told you, looks at us and says, how could you do this to me? Don't you know that no idea of me is me? The only way to know God is to embrace the willingness not to know God. And yet at the same time, to do the work to live into and out of God's presence. So we have just spent weeks talking about the words that we call the Lord's Prayer. And just to be clear, the purpose of prayer is not to pray. The purpose of prayer is simply to love God and to allow God to love us. We are not created to have thoughts about God. Remember, molasses in one hand, feathers in the other. So we say that God is like our Father, but God is nothing like a father. We say that God is creator, but we have no idea what that means. And when we claim we do, we have just limited God. All of our thoughts about God, no matter how profound they might be, fall profoundly short. God is unnameable. So when the mystic Meister Eckhart prayed, I pray God rid me of God, what he was praying was to the unnameable to rid him of the idol we have named God. I'm not going to make this application specific, but we are living in a time when idolatry is on the rise, not the decrease. Now, as I ended last week, I said, I hope you don't understand this. It's a mystery. Just enjoy it. Step into it. Open yourself to the experience. And contrary to what that might appear, this is not airy-fairy stuff. If we're serious about living both into and out of our true identity, we will be driven, as was Jesus, to do the work of peace, justice, nonviolence, compassion, and generosity. I think it was from Alan Watts from whom I first learned the meaning of nirvana. Nirvana is one of those words that cannot be translated into English. I don't think it can be translated into any language. Nirvana means this. Nirvana means if you hold your breath, it will kill you. If you hold on to any idea, even the idea of God, too tightly, it will kill it. Jesus said, what you're looking for is right here, right now. You're in it, and it is in you. Open your eyes to this. Use your beginner's mind, your childlike mind, your non-dual mind to see this. Okay? So now here is the performance piece that Jesus played. Hear it like that. Don't hear it through dualistic mind. This is a performance piece. Jesus said, that is why I tell you, don't fret about life, what you're going to eat, or about your body, what you're going to wear. Remember, there's more to living than food and clothing. Think about the crows. They don't plant or harvest. They don't have storerooms or barns. Yet God feeds them. You're worth more than birds. Can any of you add an hour to your life by fretting about it? So, if you can't do a little thing like that, why worry about the rest? Think about how the wild lilies grow. They don't slave and they never spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon, the height of his glory, was never decked out like one of them. If God dresses up the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is tossed into an oven, it is surely more likely that God cares for you, you who don't take anything for granted. Now, the scholars I trust say that this is the longest single non-parabolic teaching of Jesus that we have. Unlike some of the things in the Sermon on the Mount, which were sayings that were put together, this has coherence from one sentence to another. You know, some people have a basic personality type that tends toward fear and anxiety. And my experience, yours may vary, but my experience is that it's just senseless to say to somebody who's frightened, don't be afraid. That does no good. There are other people like me. My personality type is that in order to deal with anxiety, I plan, which takes me out of the present because I'm planning. You know, what's going to happen next week, what I'm going to watch on TV tonight, what I'm going to cook for dinner. It's the way that sevens deal with stuff. It's helpful for me to know what I'm going to be teaching weeks ahead of time. And I'm not the only one who's heard this teaching of Jesus and thought, well, that's stupid. We have to know how we're going to pay for stuff. We have to pay the rent. We have to pay the car payment. We have to put some money aside in case there's a medical emergency. Yet, if you read the entire narrative of Jesus, he spends a lot of time advising people not to fret. Or he fusses at them for doing so. He talks a lot about fear. He even equates being fearful with a lack of faith. Why are you so frightened, you of little faith? Now, I would agree that fretting and worrying don't do any good. It's like superstition. It's like if we worry about something, it won't happen. That's a superstition. If you do an Indian rain dance long enough, it will eventually rain. I think this is maybe one of my most favorite cartoons. You get it? There's only one person at the rain dance who brought an umbrella. There is so much going on in this teaching. And my commitment to do one and move on, it's being tempted because it's just so rich. So the religion of Jesus' day was fear-based. It was based on the belonging system. If you didn't belong, you were done for. And there were hundreds of laws and rules and regulations that had to be followed for you to belong, for you to be part of the in-group. So the religion of Jesus' day was fear-driven. And even so, the crowd to which Jesus preached was not part of that in-group, most of them. And he told them they are now living in a realm, or could be, where there's nothing to fear. That didn't match reality in the outer world. Now, I want to be clear. Jesus is not advising people to live imprudently, because elsewhere he says, look, before you follow me, you better sit down and count the cost. It's going to take you more than you think. So be prudent. What he's teaching in this teaching is the values by which one lives and the willingness to live by the ethic that no one is special. One of the first most painful things my spiritual teacher in the 60s said to me was, Kerley, most of your problems would disappear if you would just get it that you're not special. I fired him. I did not. I fell in love with him. He was wonderful. Now, the only thing that I know in our culture that comes close to this teaching are the various recovery groups of which I'm familiar. Because we're confronted at every turn in our culture with a competitive, consumer-oriented ethic. Our culture encourages self-centeredness and the absolute avoidance of taking personal responsibility. Poor Joe Biden. He's to blame for everything. And if that were not so frightening, it would be funny. It's comical how the people at the top of our government are bragging about or pushing for a Christian nation, while the very things they are doing is creating more and more of the very population Jesus was the most concerned about. I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to write a Substack on the ballroom. Because I'm told that I want and need it. The controversial ballroom seems to be costing somewhere between $400 million and, get this, $1 billion. with enhanced security. The cost of the unnecessary criminal invasion of Iran is somewhere between $29 billion, could go all the way to $1 trillion. All of this causes people whose values do not align with these expenditures to be frightened and to feel left out. While ironically, fear seems to be what is causing elected officials and representatives to be unwilling or unable to speak up about any of this. One of my favorite comedians is Desi Lydic. And she has put together a bit on the ballroom, which I'm sure you can suss out by going to YouTube. And in it, she has at least 20 clips from both politicians and talking heads declaiming how much and badly the American people need, want, and will appreciate the ballroom, which I'm sure not a person in this room will ever get to go into. If you do, I'd like to be your date. And so I wonder lately, where's the red line that has to be crossed before mainline Protestant Catholic churches speak up and speak out? And yet, at the same time, I myself am sometimes struck speechless in the face of a president who lies, insults, mimics, cheats, and brags about it. Someone who openly manipulates and humiliates. And I wonder, what is the Jesus way to respond to this? Now, people who are on the right, political right, seem to be able freely to be enablers of what's going on. A Christian pastor prayed at the installation of the golden Trump statue. And I'm reminded periodically by some people that I shouldn't be political and that Jesus wasn't political. It's true, though, that the political power in his time is what executes Jesus, not the religious power. That was very political. So here's what I want to say. We're living through a consequential moment in America's history. There's a right side and a wrong side to that history. And every religious system that I know anything about teaches that someday, I don't know when, there will be a reckoning. People reap what they sow. There's the rule of law of karma. The arc of history bends toward justice. And at some point, both individuals and institutions will have to justify their response to that time when democracy was and is under attack. People and organizations, some of them with proud histories of inclusion and equity, will have to explain why they abandoned those principles of fairness and justice. Were they afraid? Were they greedy? Or did they simply not care? We have got to choose to be on the right side of history, not in order to win, but because it's right. And though faith is not a set of doctrines to believe, the faith, which is opposite fear and certitude, that Jesus is advocating in this teaching we are looking at today, is a fearless willingness to look for wise and useful truths and to implement them. And at this moment, the way I would translate this teaching for us today is do not let anything throw you off the path of humility, justice, and peace. And when it happens, as will be inevitable, do the work to get back on. I'm not a behavioral psychologist. I know some of the tricks of those people. And one of the rubrics of behavioral psychology is that there's no behavior which, if observed long enough, will not change. This is why if you go to a weight loss clinic, they will ask you to write down every bit of food that goes in your mouth, every caloric liquid that you ingest. And just the act of doing that will cause you to lose weight. For one thing, it's a pain, you know what to do that. So I have a behavioral psychology tip for you. This coming week, pay attention to every time you say or you hear the phrase, "I'm afraid so." Our refrigerator in our apartment went out this week. Sherry says, "Are we going to lose everything in the freezer?" I'm afraid so. Are we out of coffee? I'm afraid so. Is this going to hurt? I'm afraid so. How's the traffic today? Is it bad? I'm afraid so. Are we going to have to wait long? I'm afraid so. Now, living the way Jesus is advising doesn't mean to live numb or dumb. It means to live with trust. And as I said, living with trust doesn't mean sitting idly back and thinking that the future will take care of itself. We live in ways that reflect that we have gotten the message that to live by Jesus' ethic means to include everyone. So are we creating a safer, better, more abundant future for the children of this world? Or to put it another way, living by this teaching means putting trusting love in the driver's seat of our lives. Now, you look at the news of our country and you see what happens when love takes a back seat. When self-righteous people, self-absorbed people, so sure that God dislikes the same people they dislike, when they do the driving. They mow down anything that gets in the way of their personal possession of the truth. And there's something about this stance of certainty that makes these people very unchristian. So I want to encourage you to enjoy the things that you don't understand. Whether it's listening to someone like Joshua Bell or even to this teaching today. Because if we put aside the wonders and glories of the mysterious and the mystical, God becomes more like a domesticated pet than sacred mystery. So as we go forward through the narrative of Jesus that Stephen Mitchell has constructed, we're going to see that the teachings of Jesus are full of promise, not peril. He says, what I'm talking about is like finding a treasure. It's like finding a pearl. He didn't begin by talking about, hey, this is what hell is like. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the teachings of Jesus or the teachings of story or your early days in church, you may recall where Jesus is being judgmental. You know that scene in Matthew, I'm going to separate the sheep from the goats? Most scholars say he didn't say that. But if he did, and he did get pretty ticked off at the religious leaders of his time, he also was constantly breaking the rules. But in that passage in Matthew, the basis of judgment is not on what people believe. It's on how they behave. It's how they treated the least of these, my brothers and sisters. And by behave, I don't mean playing by the petty moral rules of our tribe. He's talking specifically about how we treat other people. And he never once mentions faith in him as some sort of ticket to safety. So here we are at this point in our going through the Jesus narrative. And at this point, I'm seeing two questions that are questions of faith. And the questions are, can we bless our neighbors in this multicultural neighborhood we call the world for who they are and not who we wish they were? Can we do that? And the other is, in spite of what is going in our culture, can we turn away from that and turn toward what feeds our soul? Can we get off our devices? Can we quit watching the news? Can we quit doom scrolling? And maybe read the Jesus narrative? Maybe pray? Maybe have a daily spiritual practice? Now, all these things are far more challenging than they first appear, because our culture is filled with things that do not feed our souls, but rather insult them. And there's the boredom, cruelty, cold, unresponsiveness, narcissism, various forms of self-absorbed addiction. There's all sorts of war and greed and dumbing down of practically everything. That's the context in which we live. So we got to turn away from that. So I'm seeing that this teaching we've looked at today has a great deal of healing and hope in it. So in a minute, you're going to get up and you're going to leave. And you will go do whatever you do, and whatever you do is going to flow from who you are. So the first step in doing the healing work that's needed in the world is going to flow from the healing that needs to take place in us. Just as hurt people, healing people heal people. And to be clear, I don't want anybody to get the mindset that, oh, we're healed, let's go fix everybody. Because people who think they got it all together make things worse. Our own process of ongoing spiritual growth, which is another phase for healing, with all of its pain and difficulty, which is why most people don't have a daily spiritual practice. It's hard and it's uncomfortable. But that helps us participate with humility and sensitivity in the ongoing healing of others and the world. So, what we do flows from who we are. What we do flows from our being and becoming. What we do in the world flows from this inner lifelong process of growth. None of us knows what the future looks like. What we can do is gain clarity about how we want to show up in the world. And Jesus says, show up as a person of faith, not fear. So I want to show up as a person of humility, justice, and peace. But I don't want to do that by myself. I want to be in a community of others who create a circle that includes people, not keeps them out. Now, there are people in groups out there that are doing that. There are people in groups in this room that are doing that. I'd like it to see it raised to a level of greater consciousness. You know, in a time that was very similar to ours, one of my heroes, Harry Emerson Fosdick, preached a sermon at Riverside Church called "It's a Great Time to Be Alive." And he meant many things by that. One was, this is a great time to be alive because it's a time when so much matters. right? You can't just sit back and take your ease. We have to strive for our best. It challenges us. And it's a time that forces us to be really clear about who we are and how we want to live. And in a time when there was so much fear, when human life was deemed so cheap and expendable, this spokesman for the sacred got up and played his performance piece that said, "Fear not." Some walked by, some stopped and listened. His mission was not to make his followers happy. We will talk about that. Obligation to be happy later. His mission was to make us partners in his mission of loving action in the world. So, take a deep breath and let's get to work. No matter where you go this week, no matter what happens, remember this: you carry precious cargo, so watch your step, and I'll see you here next week. Thank you.